My name is Dr. Robert Wayne. I'm a retired general surgeon living in Cannon Beach. And the topic today is active shooter, which means what do you do when, when the stuff hits the fan and you've got to figure out how to get out of harm's way, especially, and all the little rules that follow that. Our guest speaker is my former partner in Historia, Dr. Camilo Rosales. Milo is a general surgeon with a very broad background. It's unusual to have someone in a small community that has that broad of a background. He practices at Columbia Memorial Hospital. I think there are two other general surgeons with him in the group there. They run a very wide practice in general surgery, but they handle a fair amount of trauma. We're all of them are trauma certified at the hospital, and it's a level 4 trauma center, soon to be level 3. We think, we don't know. A little background for Milo: he took his residency training at Denver General, which is also a level 1 trauma center, by the way. And then he finished out at the Nassau Medical Center downstate on Long Island, which is also a level 1 trauma center that sees a lot of big stuff at that site. Then subsequently, he practiced in Hawaii for about 20 years. He was on Maui, and he was at one time the only general surgeon, the main one. He was there for about 20 years and did a wide breadth of general surgery, including thoracic and vascular. Those are things that are not done at smaller hospitals as a rule, but he has this experience, at least from the past. And then he moved on to practice in Portland for a year or two, and eventually ended up about 6 years ago at Columbia Memorial Hospital. And he's been the chief of surgery in the past for a long time. Now he is the chief of staff, I believe. And one of the credentials you have to do surgery is be a member or involved with the ATAB. That's the Area Trauma Advisory Board. And Milo and I have both been very active members of that for many, many years. So he has lots of credentials and exposure to bad trauma, especially gunshot wounds. I think I've covered all the bases. Milo, did you want to add anything before you start?
No, Bob, that was pretty good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take it away, Milo.
All right, so we're going to talk about an active shooter situations, and I've divided it up into three different sections. But we have to remember that it's not just an active shooter that we have to worry about. It's just any nut with intent to harm lots of people. For instance, in Japan, there was a knife attack. At least 19 people were killed with a knife. There was a gentleman who pled guilty to mass murder involving a samurai sword. In Florida, a man was accused of killing 3 co-workers with a baseball bat and injuring multiple others. So it's not just a gun. You have to be prepared for other sources of attack. So we're not going to talk about the statistics of gun violence or anything else, because as Mark Twain said, there are lies, there are damn lies, and there are statistics. We know it happens. We have to be prepared for it. So the first section of the talk is on-site person reaction. Run, hide, and fight. Sounds simple, but it's not really. If you run, if you find yourself in that situation, get out when you can. Try to help others out. But don't let other people's indecisiveness prevent you from leaving. Otherwise, you'll both be victims. Once you get out, don't let others go into the danger area. It sounds simple. Hey, you're going to stop them. Not necessarily. People panic, as we've seen at that concert down in Texas. People start panicking and they do all kinds of crazy things, chomping on each other. So the next most important thing is to stop, slow down, and think. When we respond to cardiac arrest in the hospital, the first rule of thumb is stop and take your own pulse. And that's the same thing you have to do in this type of a situation. Um, Gunshot noise can reverberate through halls, making it difficult to know which way the shooter is coming from. So stop and figure it out. Look, see if you can see evidence of the gunshots going in a certain direction. You should always plan your escape before you need to escape. Now, this is a really great rule, and I'm sorry that I put that second, because that should be first. When you walk into a theater, always look where the nearest door is. That's why when you get on an airplane, your flight attendants are telling you, look where your exit sites are. It's the same thing anytime you walk into a building. Something happens, where can you escape to? It doesn't have to necessarily just be a shooter. If you're in California, you go down to Disneyland and you're at your hotel, you don't have to have an active shooter. You could have an earthquake. You need to know where to stand and where to escape to. So again, gunshot noises can reverberate. And so now you're running and you have to avoid dead ends. Don't run into the bathroom. You run into the bathroom, there's no other door to get out of, unless you know that there's another door, but most of the time it's one entrance in and one entrance out, and you're stuck. Don't run in a straight line. As anybody who hunts can tell you, it's easy to shoot at something that is going straight as opposed to zigzagging around. When you're running, run from cover to cover. And when you run from cover to cover, find cover that can stop bullets. Hide behind large objects which can provide protection. Example, you're running in a parking garage and you run behind a car. Don't hide behind the trunk. The trunk only has two pieces of thin metal to protect you. Hide behind the engine. If you're in an office building, hide behind that big oak desk that your boss has, or behind that large filing cabinet, which used to be there before computers, but hide behind that, because that all the paper and everything else will prevent things from going through. Remain quiet and lock and block the door. Silence your phones. So let's talk about the blockade of the door. We see on television and we see in the movies where everybody piles up all kinds of furniture in front of the door, and then the guy starts kicking it in and moving all the furniture up. Well, if you lined up that furniture from that door to the opposite wall, he's going to have one heck of a time kicking that out, because he has to kick out the other wall. Hide behind objects that can stop bullets, like I said, and don't stand in front of the doors or walls, because that's where he's going to be shooting. So, sorry, backing up. Go high or go low. When somebody is shooting, they're going to be shooting at their level. Get up above, because he's probably not going to be shooting up. Get down below, because he's not going to be shooting down. He's going to be shooting across. So that can help prevent you from getting hit. The next is fight. You have to incapacitate the assailant. You have to act with aggression. You have to improvise weapons, and you have to commit to your actions. You are fighting for your life. If there's a number of you, set up a team of members who are willing to fight. Improvise weaponry. Get those heavy statues, get those heavy lamps, get something that's heavy that can be used to bludgeon the attacker if possible. Get control of the gun first, and then use it against the assailant if possible. Getting control of the gun. All right, somebody has their gun out, somebody jumps on the gun, grabs onto the gun, and falls. When you fall, most people are not going to be able to hold up a person who's falling down forward. So let gravity do its work. Fall down, and once you're holding on to it, hopefully your partner with a heavy improvised weapon will bludgeon the assailant and get him under control. If you have to go for getting the shooter down, go for the head or the hips, and then fall down and let somebody else help you with it. One of the most important things is to make sure the assailant is controlled before you start to help others. If don't knock him out and think, okay, he's there, I'm going to turn around and start helping people. Typical Hollywood scene where somebody turns around and starts helping him, and the guy wakes up and then starts shooting again or does something else. Make sure they're controlled. If that means you have to tie them up, tie them up. But make sure that you can move around safely. When help arrives, remain calm. Keep your hands visible at all times. The first responders are not going to know who is the assailant or who's faking being a victim. All right, so keep your hands visible, don't panic, and if possible, explain to the first responder that yes, you have control. The first responders are there to stop the assailant, not to render care to the injured. Once they know that the situation is safe, then you can start rendering care. So now we've got control of the situation. We've run, we've hid, we've battled back, we've caught the assailant, we've brought him to the ground, we now have him incapacitated, and now we turn around and we start seeing who are the wounded and who are the dying. All right. So when we need to do what we call stop the bleed. And so the first one is pack the wound. If you have a gunshot wound to the leg and it's spurting blood, start stuffing up. If you have sterile packing, apply it. If the packing is not available, any clean cloth will do. Pack the wound until the bleeding stops. Don't remove the packing until the resources are available. And if it continues to bleed, consider placing a tourniquet.
So Milo.
And I've been teaching the stop the bleed class now for several years. It's very important how to stop hemorrhage when you encounter it. There are several ways, including, for instance, a tourniquet, or what I'm going to show you now, a deep hole that's bleeding, and you have to pack the gauze deep into the wound. Now, watch me as I do it. It's not easy, because at the bottom of this fake wound that you can see here, I have bone that I can feel. So I have to tuck my gauze in deep, and as I pack it, the patient may be screaming or yelling because they're in pain, and I'll have active bleeding bubbling up at me. I mean, it's not easy to do, but you have to get your fingers deep into the wound, packing all the corners that you can until you have most of the gauze in the wound. And then you need to put pressure on the wound like this with two hands so that you can wait until someone like I or another trained person shows up. Incidentally, you can easily use a t-shirt or a sock or whatever else is handy, even though it's not sterile, because all you want to do is get something down into the wound that can tampen on or press on the bleeding. And then you just keep pressure until, as I said, somebody shows up to help you.
I'm sorry, somebody called my name.
So Milo, this is Lila. I just had a question.
Yes, Lila.
So if I'm not really good with guns. So I'm not sure what I would do to take the gun away from somebody, and then what I would do with the gun.
Well, Lila, if the most important thing, you're in a situation where you're not good with guns, and you need to run, you need to hide, and you need to protect yourself and blockade yourself in. No, we're not saying that you have to be good with guns. The most important thing is that somebody, if you're not going to be able to overpower the person, well, you can't overpower them, then you have to find a different way of saving yourself. All right. But let's take, for instance, that you and I were in that room, right? Then I would jump on him, right? I would jump at the gun, grab the gun, fall to the floor with the assailant probably, still holding on to the gun. And then I would hope that we had been discussing what you were going to hit him in the head with. All right. because you have to be, in order to save a life, sometimes you really have to act with force. Okay?
I'd just like to make a comment. I see our chief of police just joined the party, and I want to make sure he missed the early part that trying to fight is the very last resort that you talked about.
That is right.
It's run first, hide second, fight as a last resort.
That is correct, because then you're fighting for your life.
Yeah, Bob, that's correct. And there are several self-defense courses through the college and also through a lot of the different agencies that can connect you with self-defense and working with how to try to defend yourself appropriately.
So we're going to talk about the tourniquet now. On the left-hand side of the screen, you see the CAT tourniquet. It's a trauma tourniquet. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a improvised tourniquet using just two pieces of cloth in order to make a windlass and to work the same. And I'm going to talk about the placement of these tourniquets and why the one on the right isn't quite correct. Okay, once again, here's Bob.
Hello, my name is Dr. Robert Lane. I'm a general surgeon. I'm going to demonstrate a technique using a CAT, C-A-T tourniquet. You can pick them up on Amazon. They're fairly inexpensive. And it stops bleeding. In this case, the patient is bleeding from below the elbow. So I'm going to put the CAT tourniquet on so that it's above the bleeding site. And I apply it. It's all Velcroed on. It goes on very easily until it's fairly tight. Then I bring it around. It's now in a good position for me to tighten what's called a windlass. Can you see this? It's a soft bar that's on the arm, and I'm going to tighten it around one time to go tighter, and then I'm going to hook it in so it's in place. Now that windlass really supplies a lot of pressure. The patient may actually complain that it hurts him a lot. And by the way, he's bleeding and he's screaming because he's in pain in addition. So it's very tricky to get this in place while this activity is going on. Once you have the windlass in place, you need to put this over the top. It's a little strap, and then you have to write on it the time that you did it, because we want to know if it's been an hour or 2 hours that the tourniquet is on when somebody shows up later. Now with this in place, you can either assign somebody who's nearby to take care of the patient, or you may have to occasionally leave them and move on to another person, but at least the bleeding should be stopped, and you'll know you've applied it properly because as you tighten the windlass, you'll actually see the bleeding stop. It won't stop from just a tourniquet itself, or even a belt can't be made to work as effectively.
So let's talk about the do's and don'ts of tourniquet. So you want to place a tourniquet 2 to 4 inches above the joint. You don't place it over the joint, and place it on the humerus or femur, not the forearm or the lower leg. There are 2 bones in the forearm, and there's 2 bones in the lower leg, and there's a blood vessel that runs in between the 2. So no matter how much you turn that tourniquet, you're not going to stop that blood vessel. So put it on the upper arm or the upper leg, and that will help. Okay, write the time of the placement down. It used to be said that we could only leave the tourniquet on for 2 hours, when in reality, combat trauma has shown that we can actually leave it on longer. Yes, there is a danger of a neurological injury, but a neurological injury is better than losing your life. So keep the tourniquet uncovered. Dr. Wayne and I were at a conference once, and we heard a story of a person who had a tourniquet placed in the field. Patient came into the hospital, was evaluated in the emergency room, admitted to the upstairs, and later that evening, a nurse came by and was taking off the patient's pants and found another tourniquet. So, because it had been covered up by the clothes. So always make sure that the tourniquet is uncovered so it can be seen. Don't remove the tourniquet once it's placed. Wait for resources. If the first tourniquet doesn't work, it is okay to apply a second tourniquet. And the tourniquet, as mentioned, should only be removed when resources are available to ensure the bleeding can be controlled. As I said, we want to try to remove them within 2 hours, but if things are crazy, it can be held on for longer, especially in young individuals. If the tourniquet is removed and there is no further bleeding and the bleeding is under control, you can replace it with a pressure bandage. So as Dr. Wayne said, cat tourniquets are preferred, but improvised tourniquets can work. So in terms of stopping the bleed, apply pressure with the hands, apply dressing and press, or apply the tourniquet, and that can save lives. So when we talk about triage, we talk about who shall live when not everyone can live. So there's 3 levels of triage. There's the pre-hospital triage, triage at the scene by the first clinician at the scene, and triage on arrival at the hospital. The pre-hospital triage involves the government, the police forces, the firemen, the ambulances, and they're going to decide what resources are immediately necessary to be sent to that area. The triage at the scene involves rapid categorization of the victims which will be designated as acute or non-acute. We can use color coding, those who can be treated and released, those who get moved to the collection site, and those who get moved to a higher level of care. The triage at the hospital, we have continuation of the categories. There's red, which is life-saving interventions are required. Somebody who has blood spurting out from a femoral artery. Immediate life-saving interventions not required are those people who have flesh wounds and who are not at risk for dying. Green, those who are people who are minimal or no medical care, or just in psychogenic shock, and black, those who are deceased. So we talk about the triage systems that are available. There's the SALT, which is the sort, assess, life-saving interventions, and treatment or transport. You see, but when you look at these folks, you determine at what level they are at. If they're walking, they're probably third. If they're down and waving, but with purposeful movement, they're second. And those people with an obvious life-threatening injury are first. So when you take a look at the injuries, do you have to control a major hemorrhage? Do you have to open an airway? Do you have to decompress a chest like placing a needle catheter for a tension pneumothorax? If the patient is breathing, great, then move on. Does he obey commands? Does he make purposeful movements? Has peripheral pulses? He's not in respiratory distress and major hemorrhage is controlled, yes, then it's maybe a minor injury, he can delay. If any of those are a no, then they need to move to immediate therapies. There's the simple triage and rapid treatment. It's another algorithm for triage. I know this is getting away from what the populace would know, but I think the sheriff would probably know about these. So just remember that we're there to help, and we're there to, the first responders do get there and bring them in, and we will be there to help make sure that we keep as many alive as possible. Thank you very much. Any questions?
I was hoping, Milo, that we could let Chief Skemmerhorn see if he has any comments to add. You missed the first part. He talked a lot about how you, dodge and evade being shot at. But maybe you have something to say about that, Chief. I don't know.
Yeah, you certainly want to do your best to protect yourself. Obviously, as we've talked about in CERT, is you're not going to be any help to anybody else if you're injured as well and part of the problem. So making sure that you either run and hide and make sure that you're safe and protecting others as well. But there may be a time when you have to act with aggression. and yell, scream, fight, do anything that you can to protect yourself, because you're at the point where you don't have a choice. I think the biggest thing, obviously, there's several classes that you can attend, and I will find out through the college when they are offering them next, but a lot of them are self-defense courses and or through the FBI that comes out and teaches through the sheriff's office what you can do to defend yourself and keep yourself protected in those times of need. But a lot of those are also taught at a office type level. Leanne, you have your hand up?
I do. And this is probably a particular and personal kind of concern, but elected public officials kind of at the front of the room, highly visible, and maybe subject to a greater risk. I've talked to the sheriff about, wouldn't it be nice if we could reinforce the dais so that we could duck down and protect? I don't know what to do except have a plan to head for the door. Do you have any advice?
Well, yeah, heading for the door isn't always the best solution, because that's how a lot of the people get trampled, heading for the door, trying to defend yourself and doing the best that you can to defend yourself. And Classic Community College teaches different defense classes, self-defense, and I would highly suggest you learn or attend those. And I can certainly find out through the college on how best to get that to you guys. And we could even set up for an MRC meeting or a CERT meeting as well.
Milo, could you mention something about the different types of guns? You're familiar with guns pretty much. I mean, if you're being shot at by a pistol, it's rather different than if someone's shooting at you with a shotgun or a rifle. I mean, is there anything either of you guys can suggest once you see what type of instrument you're being shot at with? I mean,
I don't think
it
that,
doesn't do any good if you're being shot with a high-powered shotgun. I mean, it'll go right through the desk.
no, it won't.
It won't?
No, it won't. Well, Chief, I think that you would, ballistically to speaking, there's, what are they going to be using, right? If you hear gunshots, you're not going to sit there and go, oh, he's got a 9mm. I can hide behind this, or he has a shotgun. No, you just want to get out of there. You don't know what they're going to be shooting with, and so I don't.
You don't think it makes a difference? Okay.
I think you just get out.
Yeah, there's two different things that you're talking about: cover or concealment. Concealment just hides you. Cover is something that they can't shoot through, but really the best thing is just getting yourself out of the picture so they can't see you, and getting yourself the best protected you can. Sometimes that may be concealment. Hopefully sometimes that can be a concrete wall that you're able to get behind to protect yourself. But it really, if it's a rifle or a handgun, it makes a big difference on whether they're able to penetrate.
That's what I was kind of getting at, yeah.
So Kathy, I saw that you put up a little sign up there that, the velocity of the bullet and everything else. Somebody who gets shot 10 times with a semi-automatic 22 and gets shot once with a 9mm is still going to hurt. So it's, if you start hearing gunshots, you just have to leave.
That's what the chief said.
Run, hide, fight.
Are there any other people who have questions? This is a good time to ask.
Jonathan?
Yeah, well, I have more of a comment, and that is what we were taught in firefighting and also with medics ambulances. That is to avoid tunnel vision. I just realize that you're going to have that, and try to avoid it if at all possible. I just recently heard about Flight 97 back in 9/11, the one that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. I don't know why we didn't hear about it earlier, but the the people who were going to try to take it over from the hijackers had the galley boil water, and they used that as a weapon. I thought that was brilliant. So just I want to mention about tunnel vision. That's really important to try to avoid.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, you know, you'll see it anytime we do active shooter training. I'd certainly like to do one again in Cannon Beach. The last time we did it was about 12 years ago, and we had some resistance from the council, but I would love to do it again where we can show you guys just how many different people are trying to intervene when you're dealing with the victims. You know, they're grabbing at your arms and wanting help because they're sensing some form of security there, or you guys are there to help. And so they're pulling at you, and it's hard to push them away and say, no, I need to get to the patients that are at hand. So that's certainly something that you need to do, but also working through that and getting the availability of other people that are there to help, whether it's the green people that you can use to help you get to where you need to be so you can render the appropriate aid is very important.
Bob is still there?
Yes, can't think of anything else, Milo. I think you had all the high points. I think I really like the slides. So if there's nothing else, maybe we should call this meeting to a close. Anybody else have any other comments?
So Bob, this is Lila.
Go ahead. Go.
Milo. I remember when we were working with Mike Myers, and he was our emergency manager in Cannon Beach, and he was involved in the shooting in Las Vegas. And I don't know how they taught the community this, but he said that their department bought all kinds of tourniquets. And when the shooting happened, they went to the shooting event, and they threw out these tourniquets, and the people in the audience applied the tourniquets and took the victims in the back of their pickup trucks to the hospital.
Well,
The point of my story is we were doing a lot of stop the bleed training before, the pandemic. And it really is the key to saving lives.
well,
Not necessarily to managing the active shooter, but at least to saving the lives of the victims.
So are you suggesting that someone should have a supply of tourniquets beyond the one or two each of us carry in our cars or our kit? I mean, Chief, if you had a crowd of people injured, would you have a handful of tourniquets to throw, to toss around to the crowd? I mean, I don't think we don't have a stockpile of those anywhere.
No, unfortunately, we wouldn't have a stockpile, or none of my officers would have a stockpile to throw out to them as well. And
Each
so
carry
that's
two.
why you fall back on a lot of what's out there that you can use, whether it's your t-shirt, a shirt, that type of thing, with a stick to try to make a tourniquet based on what you have. And no, there's not going to be a point where we have a ton of tourniquets to throw out to a crowd.
Yeah, Milo explained how you could use a piece of cloth, and the thing they call a windlass is simply a stick. It was in one of Milo's slides before you came on. And once you get a knot going of any material, then you can make the windlass, a piece of stick or whatever you have, twist it and make it a pretend tourniquet. It's not nearly as good as the Velcro or the actual cat, but it's reasonable. A simple belt doesn't do the trick. I recently had well, it's not recently, but I had one of my people who took the course sent me an email that he arrived at a site where someone had been injured in a car. I think he was on a motorcycle, and they were trying to use a belt to tighten it, and they couldn't get it to work. And he had just taken the class. He had the proper tourniquet with him, a cat tourniquet. He put it on, it stopped the bleeding just like that. The patient was able to be transported. So, you know, the windlass idea, if you can invent one, just a knot and then start twisting, that's an alternative. Milo, anything else to add? No.
No, Bob,
Yeah.
that's it.
Okay. Thank you. I think we'll close now. And Milo's, I don't think I have anything else to add. I want to thank Bob Kroll again for setting this up. It's always a chore to make it work. I think it's being recorded so that we'll be able to make it available online eventually. I want to thank everybody for attending. Even I felt like I learned quite a bit tonight from this. So thank you all very much. And I guess I'll say good night.
Lila has her hand up.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Lila. Who is it?
Lila, did you want to say something? You're on mute.
Nope. There you go.
So I think my take home message for all of this is active shooting always causes bleeding. And that if there's a way for us to resurrect our active bleeding training, that would be ideal. I think I saw that people were doing it online. I don't know how much that would be effective because you actually have to, you know, poke the gauze into the wound to learn how to do it. But we recently took our CPR class with little mini mannequins, and it was somewhat effective. But if we could get back to, you know, training people about stopping the bleed, I think we'd move forward a lot further with this possibility. That's all.
So you're thinking we should have a refresher course on Stop the Bleed? That would be very short to deal with, but it probably could be done. I'll check in with the Stop the Bleed people and see if they have any version of this as a Zoom. That's all. I'll look into it. I know they're doing some new things.
I know it is available as
Oh, it is?
as an online presentation now. They've sent out
Okay.
emails saying that it's available. I just haven't looked into it.
Okay, there you go. Okay,
Love the video, Dr. Wayne.
You don't know how many takes that took.
Thank you, Milo.
All right, have a good night.
Thank
And
you so much.
Jason, I don't know if you're still there, but I'd be interested in hearing about the training when you find out the self-defense.
Yes, I will certainly try to get it out to the rest of this group. I know that they've taught it through the college, but also through several of the different gunsmiths. So I will make sure that I get that out to you guys.
Good, thank you.
Once this, the video will get posted on the city's emergency management website in the training section, and then we'll send out the link to it. So